It's late September 1941. It's a moment of triumph for Nazi Germany. 3 months ago, they invaded the Soviet Union. 3 million prisoners, thousands of tanks destroyed, Leningrad besieged, Kyiv fallen. It seems nothing can stop the Wehrmacht machine. And now Hitler orders the final, decisive strike. Codenamed Typhoon. The meaning is clear. A hurricane that will sweep away everything in its path and ravage Moscow before winter sets in. He believed this strike would be decisive and bring a logical conclusion to his plans. But it didn't happen. Let's find out why. Only after the capture of Kyiv and the breakthrough to Leningrad did Hitler order all forces to be thrown at Moscow. For this attack, Germany mustered a fist of unprecedented strength. Army Group Center, under the command of Field Marshal Fedor von Bock, numbered 1.8 million men. Nearly 1.5 million, including reserves, 1,700 tanks, 14,000 guns, 1,400 aircraft. In this direction, the Germans concentrated a third of all their artillery on the Eastern Front, half their aircraft, and 3/4 of their tank divisions. What could the Soviet Union counter this with? 3 fronts: the Western, Reserve, and Bryansk. But their divisions had already been bled dry by summer battles. Many units were fresh reinforcements, militias with no combat experience. Rifle divisions were sometimes half dead. The balance of forces on paper, 1.2 million Soviet soldiers against 1.8 million Germans. In artillery, the Germans outnumbered them by more than 2 to 1. In tanks, by 1.6 times. In aircraft, by 1.7 times. But these are average figures. In the axis of the main attacks, the Wehrmacht's superiority would be monstrous. 4 to 5 times in personnel, 5 to 9 times in artillery and tanks. General Guderian, the father of the German tank army, wrote, "Moscow is not only the head and heart of the USSR. It is the communications center, the political center, the industrial heart. If we win at Moscow, the rest of the region will fall to us as well." On October 2, Hitler addressed his soldiers. His order was, "The preconditions have finally been created for the final, enormous blow, which must lead to the destruction of the enemy before the onset of winter. Today begins the last, great, decisive battle of this year." No one at the German headquarters doubted. Moscow would fall within a few weeks. But the Germans, being Germans, wouldn't have started with a cunning start. On September 30th, 2 days before the official start, Guderian launched a strike with his 2nd Panzer Group against the left flank of the Bryansk front. The Soviet command was disoriented, and on October 2, the main forces entered the fray. Tank spearheads from the north and south broke through the defenses of the western and reserve fronts. Their goal was to close west of Vyazma. What happened next will be called by historians one of the Red Army's greatest catastrophes. Orel fell on October 3, Spasdemensk and Kirov on October 4. On October 5, the Germans entered Unov, and on October 6, the tank pincers closed in the Vyazma area. 37 Soviet divisions, 9 tank brigades, and 31 artillery regiments were encircled. That's 7 field armies. The loss figures still make one shudder. In the pockets near Vyazma and Bryansk, Soviet troops lost over 600,000 men captured and over 300,000 killed and wounded. The fronts lost 85% of their tanks and artillery. In his order of October 19, von Bock reported 673,000 prisoners and 1,277 captured tanks. The road to Moscow seemed open. German motorcyclists were already driving along the Mozhask highway. Panic began to set in Moscow. October 16th was a day that eyewitnesses would remember as the day of Exodus. Thousands of people were trying to leave the city. Trains were overcrowded. Rumors of the capital's surrender spread instantly. On October 19th, Stalin declared a state of siege in Moscow. The city prepared for street fighting. At this critical moment, Stalin made perhaps the best personnel decision of his life. On October 7, he summoned General Georgy Zhukov from Leningrad. Zhukov arrived in Moscow, and Stalin dispatched him to investigate the situation on the ground. What Zhukov saw at Western Front headquarters shocked him. The situation was unknown, and contact with the armies had been lost. Zhukov demanded a map. He was brought a map with a completely different situation. On October 10, Zhukov assumed command of the United Western Front. His task was to create a new line of defense at any cost. This line ran through Volokholimsk, Mozhask, Maloyaroslavets, and Kaluga. But there was practically nothing to cover it with. Zhukov had only about 90,000 men at his disposal across the entire front. That's less than a division per kilometer. What could he do? Only one thing: plug the holes with what he had. Cadets from the Podolsk military schools, militiamen, remnants of defeated divisions emerging from encirclement. The story of the Podolsk cadets has become legendary. It's the heroic defense of Moscow in October 1941, when approximately 3,500 cadets from the artillery and infantry schools sacrificed their lives to delay the German advance at the Ilyinsky Line for 12 days, holding back the enemy's superior forces. These young men inflicted losses on 100 tanks and up to 5,000 soldiers, giving the Soviet forces time to regroup and save the capital. Of the 3,500 men, approximately 2,500 were killed, and many of the survivors were wounded. On November 16th, a battle rages near Volokholamsk that will be included in all textbooks. General Panfilov's 316th Rifle Division takes up defensive positions along a broad front. Opposing them are two tank divisions. At the Dubosikovo siding, 28 soldiers from the 4th Company of the 1075th Regiment engage in battle against several dozen German tanks. Later, Krasnaya Zvezda will tell the story of these 28 heroes who destroyed 18 tanks and almost all of the dead. Historians still debate the details, but the essence remains unchanged. Panfilov's division fought to the death. These were the 28 Panfilovites. Several films will be made about their heroism, and this story will be included in history textbooks. Late November 1941, frost struck early. The German army, planning to end the war before winter, was unprepared for the cold. Grease froze in weapons. Equipment wouldn't start. Soldiers froze in greatcoats designed for European winters. Western historians often say, General Frost saved Moscow, but that's only half the truth. The cold hit both sides, but the Soviet soldiers were at home. They knew this climate. They had learned to fight in these conditions. On November 15th to 16th, the Germans make a final attempt. In the north, they push toward Klin and Solnitnogorsk. In the south, Guderian attempts to bypass Tula and attack Kashira. By November 28th, the German advance units reach the Moscow-Volga Canal near Yakroma. A little more, and they will be in Khimki. On November 30th, intelligence reports German tanks in Krasnaya Polyana. This is 27 kilometers from the Kremlin. The center of Moscow. Its fall would mean the collapse of the entire Soviet Union. Barricades are being hastily erected in Moscow. Anti-tank barriers line the streets. Anti-aircraft gunners peer into the sky from rooftops. The city is preparing for the final battle, but at Zhukov's headquarters, another plan is already brewing. Intelligence reports, the German forces are exhausted. Reserves are running low. Soldiers are exhausted. Communications are stretched thin. The moment has arrived when the advancing enemy is more vulnerable than ever. By early December, the Wehrmacht's offensive momentum had petered out. Here, 20 to 30 kilometers from Moscow, the Germans went on the defensive for the first time in World War I. They didn't know that this wasn't a respite. This was the beginning of the end. December 5, 1941, 3 a.m. Something the Germans hadn't expected was beginning on the front from Kalinin to Yelets. A counteroffensive. The Soviet command had secretly brought up reserves. Siberia, the Far East, the Urals drains carrying new, fresh divisions had been moving toward Moscow all autumn. Stalin knew. Richard Sorge had announced that Japan would not enter the war. Troops could be withdrawn from the east. By early December, the balance of power had shifted. The Germans had 800,000 men near Moscow. The Soviets had 720,000, but we were already equal in tanks, and even slightly superior in aircraft. The attack is carried out in three directions. The northern group is aimed at Klin and Solnitnogorsk. The center is aimed at Istra. The south is aimed at Tula and Kashira. The objective is to destroy the strike forces and push the enemy back from Moscow. The first few days stun the Germans. They can't believe their eyes. The Russians have gone on the offensive. The news spreads through headquarters like wildfire. The attack is carried out in three directions. The northern group is aimed at Klin and Solnitnogorsk. The center is aimed at Istra. The south is aimed at Tula and Kashira. On December 8th, Hitler signed Directive No. 39, ordering a defensive response along the entire eastern front. But the order came too late. The front was bursting at the seams. On December 8th, Hitler signed Directive No. 39, ordering a defensive response along the entire eastern front. But the order came too late. The front was bursting at the seams. On December 13th, the Soviet Information Bureau announced to the country and the world, the German encirclement of Moscow had failed and the strike forces had been routed. For the first time in 6 months of war, the world heard the word victory. The Battle of Moscow would last until April 20th, 1942. Soviet troops would push the enemy back 100 to 250 kilometers. They would liberate the Tula, Ryazan, and Moscow regions, as well as parts of the Kalinin and Smolensk regions. But the cost of this victory was horrific. The exact losses are still a matter of debate among historians. The Red Army's total losses in the Battle of Moscow were approximately 1.8 million. Of these, almost 930,000 were irreparable. The Germans lost approximately 500,000. Behind every number is a human life, a soldier who never returned home, a mother who never saw her son again, children left orphans. But the most important thing the Battle of Moscow accomplished was dispelling a myth, the myth of the German army's invincibility. For the first time since 1939, the Wehrmacht had not simply been stopped. It had been rooted and driven back. German general and military historian Kurt von Tippelskirch would later write, "For the first time in World War I, something unthinkable happened. The German army was retreating. Hitler's blitzkrieg had failed. The war had entered a new phase, of protracted war of attrition. And in this war, Germany had no chance."